Hi guys, this is Paul from emodels.co.uk. Welcome back to part 3 of our Airfix 148 Messerschmitt BF109 build. In this part we'll be covering the gluing of the fuselage halves together, the filling, the sanding of them. We'll then be building the wing sections, adding the tail sections to the plane. So I hope you like what you see. Let's carry on. Okay guys, so we're going to glue the two fuselage halves together now. I'll be using Tamiya Extra Thin for this, but you can use any of the thin style cement, be it Tamiya, Mr. Hobby, Mr. Cement, or any of the Plasticworld types. We'll then move on to filling the fuselage gaps, which there isn't really, but there'll be very, very slight lines where it'll be seen once it's being glued. Normally you'll need several types of product to fill these gaps, because on a lot of kits, especially older ones, there are quite prominent lines, so you need a lot of types of Squadron White and Green and the Vallejo putty and filler. On this one we won't be needing those, so we'll be using the Mr. Hobby Mr. Dissolve putty and Mr. Hobby, Mr. Surfacer. I've got two of these. I've got the 500 and the 1200. Just like sandpaper, they're almost a different consistency, as in sandpapers are different grades. 1200s are thinner, so if you haven't got as big a gap to fill, use the 1200. They do 1000 as well, and right down to the 500. I don't think we'll use the 500 on this one, so I think it'll just be the Dissolve putty, then Mr. Surfacer. That'll be then sanded smooth. And hopefully, fingers crossed, you shouldn't be able to see any of the gaps at all. We'll then move on to rescribing, where we're taking panel lines out with sanding, etc. So for now, we'll carry on with gluing. So, like I said, Tamiya Extra Thin, very, very thin glue, almost like water. Don't need a lot, and this type of glue actually melts the plastic, so it does work very, very well. So on we go. So you're literally following the panel lines. I say panel lines, I mean the fuselage halves. Just a little bit of time, you don't want a lot of glue, you don't want it to run off, because it'll leave a nice big mark where the glue's ran. And we're just going all around the model. Allowing the extra thin to carry itself into any gaps, which will then obviously glue them. So as I said, just be very careful, you don't need a lot at all. Like I say, if it runs, it will melt the plastic where it goes, so just be quite sparing. As soon as it goes on, you can see it's starting to melt the plastic. And obviously if it's a painted area, it will remove the paint, so if you don't want to be removing paint, don't be getting glue on it. Obviously on the exterior, this is just overspray from where I've sprayed the cockpit, so there's no need to worry about that at all. Again, one thing I did notice from part 2 was where I'd attached the instrument panel. I'll just zoom in a little bit so you can see. When I was editing the video, I did notice a slight gap between the top of the fuselage and instrument panel, which was there and there. So what I did off camera, I took it back apart because it's still unclips, but it won't now. Removed that part and glued it back in the right position, so now there's no gap there at all. So a few may spot it in part 2, but I've rectified that now anyway, as you can see. So we zoom back out. So we flip around. So I'm going to put that to one side now, let that dry for a bit. Always go around and check and make sure there's no areas that need holding together. On this kit there isn't really, because it clips together so well. The only part is there on the tail, so I'm just going to use a clothes peg just to clamp that shut. Make sure the clothes peg's not touching where there's any glue, otherwise you'll come back and you'll have a peg on the tail of your plane, which is never good. just sit it to one side and let it dry. Okay, so this has had about 20 minutes to dry now. I've gone all over the model with a sanding stick and a sanding sponge to remove the first remnants of what were left behind from gluing and what have you. So the next step now is to go over with Mr. Hobby, Mr. Dissolve Putty, which helps fill in the very small holes or gaps. Once sanded again, we'll then go over with Mr. Surfacer 1200. It's a very fine filler, so that should fill any very small, minute holes or gaps. Not that there's any holes in it. Again, once sanded and polished, we shouldn't have any visible seams on the model at all. In the meantime, I've started painting the pilot. I just zoom in a little bit. Primed him in alkali grey primer, and he's just been given a first coat of Vallejo Luftwaffe blue. I think the code's 105. He's come a crop of a rather unfortunate injury, which I wouldn't wish on any of my worst enemies. Literally, I've drilled up there with a pin vise and a drill bit, and I set a cocktail stick. Makes it a lot easier to spray and paint, as there's no need to handle it all the time. You're always going to lose paint that way before it dries. Once he's fully dry, I'll probably give another coat of the Vallejo model colour, which is this one here. It's 7816 Luftwaffe uniform, position 105. I go by the position numbers, it makes them easy to find. And then we'll start adding some of the other colours, like his gloves, boots, life vest, etc. Get them detailed up. So just make a bit of room. So we're going to use Mr. Hobby's Mr. Dissolve Putty. It needs a good shake to mix it back up. It's cellulose based, so be careful where you get it, because cellulose lacquer does, not plastic. Has a normal cap and a protective inner cap. Just be very careful removing this one, because if it's going to go anywhere, it'll be now. Keep a tissue at hand. Give it a light stir. I like to use cocktail sticks because they're cheap and you can just throw them away once done. Give it a light stir to mix everything up inside. It's thick, but it's not overly thick, so it is nice to use as a filler, because, like I say, it really does get in all those little nooks and crannies. So once you've stirred it up, dispose your cocktail stick, obviously. Brushes, if you're going to use a brush, make sure it's one that you can either clean or that you don't care if you throw away. I tend to buy a pack of very, very cheap artist brushes. I get about 150 for about £10. I use them once, throw them away. They're very cheap, they're not worth reusing. And they come in very, very handy for instances like this. So get a little bit on the brush, not too much. What I'll zoom us in a little bit, so you can see what I'm doing a bit better. And then, just like the glue, just be quite sparing and just dot and dab it on is how I prefer to use it. Don't brush it, because at the end of the day you're trying to fill a gap, not cover the entire model. And again, be careful you've got none on your fingers, because with it being lacquer based, it does melt the plastic. And again, you'll be leaving nice fingerprints behind, which are never good. Obviously get enough on your brush that you can drop it on, but not too much that you're going to end up getting it everywhere. It's quite fast drying, which is nice. Saves you having to wait around forever. I find a lot of the putty types can take quite a while to dry. Apart from the Vallejo putty, which dries pretty quick. That's quite nice to use, but obviously if you haven't got a big panel line gap like this one hasn't, it's not worth using. So this is where these Mr. Hobby products come in very handy. Again, they're available for me models. They've just come into stock now, and they're very, very useful, especially for this fuselages. Works fantastic. Once you've done one side, flip it over. Make sure you do not touch it, because it will leave a mark on your model if you get a fingerprint on it. So there we go. Once you've done, just make sure you go around, make sure you've got everywhere covered. What you will notice, if you have got a deeper gap anywhere, like I have it, it's perfect. Once you put it in and it has started to dry, you'll see there where it's actually sunk into the little gap. I knew there was a slight gap there. I was hoping this would do it, but it hasn't first time round. So because you can see where it is, just get a little bit more and just dot and dab it over the top. You can do this as many times as you want. Once it's dry, you can go back over again and again. Like I said, the beauty of it is it will sink into any gaps, so you can spot it quite easily. So there we go, we're all done there. Right, so the Mr. Hobby Mr. Dissolve putty's dried. I sanded it off using a sanding sponge and one of my files as well. There's no real seam there anymore, nothing you can feel with a fingernail, that's for sure. So what we'll do now is, as a final coat, we'll give it a little bit of Mr. Surfacer 1200, just as a final fill for any small gaps there will be, which, to be honest, you will see them as soon as you prime the model, so you can always go back should the need be. Again, be careful, it gets everywhere, and this one does, because it's a well used bottle, so it's all over my fingers already. Get your brush, again, make sure to have a one that you're willing to sacrifice, or that you're going to clean it straight away, because once this stuff dries, there really is no going back. So just like the Mr. Dissolve putty, just all over the model where there is a gap. You'll notice this one's a lot thinner than the last, for obvious reasons. This is just like a final fill, so it doesn't need to be thick. The Mr. Surfacer 1200's dried now. I've taken the majority of it off to save you watching me sand it all. Underneath, lovely, no gaps now. I can literally drag my nail across and there's nothing there anymore. The front where we had a gap, again, nothing there anymore whatsoever, all filled in, so that's very nice. So I've just got this top part to do and a little piece underneath, and then she should be ready for rescribing. Just these top few panel lines, and again underneath, just to give some other detail back in for later when we go to playing a wash when she's all sprayed. So sand the stick, sand the sponge. I like the sponge myself because they're flexible, so they conform to the edges better rather than just filing flat one area. So make sure it's clean, give it a wipe off, because they do hold dust and that does impair their performance. And just literally sand away. They don't need much pressure. Again, because this is thinner than the Mr. Dissolve putty, it doesn't need as much wear to remove, so just take your time. Stop from time to time to check. Again, wipe it off from time to time. I've got a bad habit, I wipe it on my trouser leg, which my girlfriend Hannah's not too keen on. So that's the end. I've got this one little piece at the front. There we go, that's gone, nice and smooth. Tail section just needs a quick once over. Like I say, you don't need to be too hard with it. Just take your time. It's all fine, and just the very front, just under the nose. There we go. It's as quick as that. Nice and easy and simple. Next, I use a polishing sponge, so it's very, very mildly abrasive one side, nice and smooth the other. All over the model with the green side. This just polishes up everywhere you sanded. So any area that you've had a sanding stick or sponge to, you just need to give it a good buff. This will lose a lot of the imperfections in the body, smoothing it all out. So once you're happy with that side, I don't know if you can see that now, it's a lot smoother than it was before. So although we haven't really used a harsh grade of sand stick, this is a 180-240. It's a very smooth polishing sponge as well. Once you start applying paint, you will see those imperfections. The white side, this is very smooth, as you can hear, as opposed to that, which is quite gritty. So this literally polishes the plastic up. And this gives a finish that you had in the first place on the model, which is quite shiny. It's super smooth. So again, anywhere you're polished, sanded, just go around. Should go everywhere. You may notice at this point as well, you start to lose a bit of detail in your cockpit. You can touch this up later. It's not a problem at all. Again, it's hard for me to do this so you can see. There we go, it's a bit better. Just all around where it's been done. Doesn't need a lot. You can hear it almost squeaking on the plastic now. So there we go. Let the camera pick that up. Nice and smooth. That line's now gone. Top's nice and smooth. Very nice. Okay, now that we're all filled, polished, sanded, everything, we have lost a few of the panel lines, top and bottom. So what we need to do now is rescribe. So using a rescribing template, I think this is a Hasegawa one, no sorry, it's for Linden, and a Tamiya P-scriber. Basically use this as the template, place it over the top of where you want to rescribe, line it up with the existing panel lines that are there, and just take your time and lightly scribe them back in. So you don't want any pressure on this P cutter at all. You just want to take your time, sure you're lined up, just let the cutter work on itself as you draw it back. So you're not trying to gouge deep panel lines in, you're just trying to put back what you basically took out by sanding. So it is just a case of take it nice and slow, because this is one part that's really easy to mess up. So you just go around till you put them all in. Once you're happy, you can move on to the next one. Okay, so that's all the rescribing done now. Sadly for me, two areas of modelling that I really need to improve in. One of them's rescribing and the other one's figure painting. And whilst my figure painting, well, I feel it is improving, my scribing isn't. So may not be perfect, but does the job and put some of the detail back in there. So there we go. This is now ready for, we'll attach the wings next, so we'll assemble those together and then attach them. Okay, so onto the wing sections. I've cut these off the sprue, tidied them up, sanded off all the excess plastic, ready to start gluing them together. Again, very nice fitting. We just connect them together. Literally fits, no major issues there whatsoever. So again, we get a little bit of the Tamiya extra thin glue. Obviously at the back we can be a bit more liberal because there's another section to go into this in a bit. So we're just going to put your glue in there. Obviously please be careful with your fingers because it's so easy to leave a fingerprint behind and then so hard to remove. So literally go along to there, across the top, and then along the front section. So again, a little tip with the thin type glues is do it upside down and let the capillary action of the glue actually drag it upwards into the wing sections, rather than you sitting here trying to do this and it running down the back of the wing. Just let capillary action drag it through. Again, keep checking your fingers are clean because it really is nothing worse than trying to get glue marks off. And once you're happy with this, use whatever method you use to clamp it up, put it to one side and just let it dry for a while. Quite an important piece this, because once dry, how you glued it, how well you glued it will leave how much filler you need to put into rectifying the mistakes. But on this, by the looks of it, I don't think we need any filler at all, which is good. Okay, right, so we step forward a little bit now. The engine cowling's now on and glued in place. The tail sections are in, the rudder, wing supports and what have you. I have positioned them, they are still wet, so I'm just trying to keep them in the position I want. I'll keep an eye on that while it's drying, so that can go to one side. The under cowling at the front, that's ready to be attached. The wings are all together now in one piece. I've got a little bit of sanding and polishing to do still once the glue is dry. All the various components are attached, the ailerons, flaps, etc. So once they're all sanded and polished smooth, I'll attach them to the, glue them to the actual fuselage itself. Like I said, this kit does fit together very well. If I just push that in, there you go. Wing roots very, very tight. A little bit of extra thin down there, they'll soon be nice and flush with the body. The under cowling, again, will just clip in place. I say clip, push fit, like so. So once these are all polished, fully dry, sanded and what have you, I'm happy where they are. I'll glue this onto the fuselage, and the next time we come back we'll focus on the canopy and maybe start some of the masking for the camo after priming, etc. So it's paulformemodels.co.uk. Check out emodels.co.uk's website, loads of new products being added. Subscribe to the videos on YouTube if you like what you see, and like us on Facebook as well. I'll be back with part 4 shortly. Take care, thanks for watching.